This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. Well, there's a lot of hot air around us, and is it balloon season? Oh no, it's that other thing, October 19th, another federal election, which keeps showing up regularly. And who better to talk about the federal election than Globe and Mail columnist Gary Mason, who was our very first guest on this show well over 4 years ago. Great to have you back for episode number 3. And you are not only a celebrated columnist, but you are now fitting in the category of one of the millions who is suffering from das Fraud, or as we call it in Mannheim and München, das großer Fraud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you been able to do? What did you do with your diesel car?
Well, I still have it. I still have it, but I'll tell you something. That column that I wrote for the Globe on sort of being a victim of this fraud.
Yes.
I can't remember a column that got so much reaction.
What did it get?
Just hundreds and hundreds of emails, and it lit up Twitter and our comment board, just because people, and a lot of them, needless to say, were fellow Volkswagen owners who felt every bit as aggrieved and ripped off as I was, and we're still kind of wondering what the heck's going to happen now.
Yeah. There's a moment in Lawrence of Arabia where a British officer looking at all these terrible hospital conditions says, outrageous! And that's what comes to mind about this Volkswagen story.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the reasons we went to Volkswagen is because of the image that the company had. It was like this great image that had been built up over years, ever since the Volkswagen van and the Bug was around. And
first car
for a lot of people.
Yes.
And their ad campaigns were so effective. And
brilliant.
And these cars that they were turning out, they had such great reviews. And we totally got sucked into it, and went along with everybody else.
So have you had a letter from them saying, bring your car in?
No, we haven't had anything, but as I pointed out, we're in a little bit better position than a lot of people because we leased our vehicles for a number of reasons. So we're able to get rid of our car in the springtime, if not sooner.
Yes.
But a lot of people that contacted me, they've just bought cars in the last couple. They're stuck, and the value of those cars are going to go down. And everybody, 90% of the people I talk to are just raring to join a lawsuit on this.
Quick take before we go to the election. Will VW totally shut down, and or will it emerge as a new brand?
That's a great question, because this thing is going to cost them $1 billion.
Billions.
Billions.
Yes.
They've set aside $7 billion just for the recall alone.
Yes.
And we're talking about potentially $13 billion to settle, the fines in the United States. This thing, I don't know how they survive.
I wonder if the CEO will change his name. he won't be able to go into a hotel and register without people glaring at him.
Yeah, well, they've dumped the CEO overseeing this. Now they've got a new guy in, but now there's an investigation of the old CEO for fraud and all sorts of things. So, this is a mess that is going to take years to clean up.
Okay, now speaking of messes that need cleaning up, we do live in this wonderful, benign country in so many ways. It's so, my standard joke is, listen for a second, no mortar shells, But here we are with lots of messes, and we have this thing called the election. So they're all yelling at each other, the 4 people, and although basically the 3 men are the ones that get all the attention, maybe once a week Elizabeth May gets a little spread. You have any sense of who's leading? Does anybody have any sense? It looks awfully close at the moment.
Yeah. I suppose, my only sense is from what I've seen recently and most of the polling breakdowns, and that seems to be on the progressive side. The Liberals seem to be pulling away a little bit from the New Democrats. The New Democrats' support in Quebec is cratering a little bit. So I think that any kind of shift in the campaign in the last couple of weeks has happened on that side. But David, my other sense is that there are fewer people on the conservative bent who are still undecided about what they're going to do. Who are still up in the air. Like you could see some conservatives who are just simply fed up with Harper, kind of the red Tories, if you will. Take a chance on Justin Trudeau. But on the progressive side, I think that there's that great clump of people. There is a large, one number I saw was 60% of people who consider themselves progressive are still not sure where they're going to land.
Really?
Between the New Democrats and the Liberals.
In my own mind, this is very cruel, but I am calling. I'm not even talking about Elizabeth May. For me, she's not even in the mix. I'm calling them, and you can decide who I'm talking about: the nut, the dud, and the autocrat.
Okay.
So in my mind, one of them is just a flat out, he's just flat. One of them he should be in a home somewhere. And the other one is an autocrat. And I don't have a big problem with him. I think, I really find it distasteful the way people are demonizing and Hitlerizing Harper. I don't say, look, he's not the jolliest guy in the world, and who wants to have coffee with him? But has he done a terrible job? Is he ripping up all our constitutional rights? I'm not getting that.
No, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, the things that are said about Stephen Harper sometimes are just they're
way over the ballpark.
Top. I mean, people, as you alluded to at the top, we have no idea sometimes. We completely forget how lucky we are to be living where we are and to be governed by, a person like Stephen Harper. I mean, sure, he's got his flaws, but I mean, a dictator he is not. I mean, people here have no idea what
a dictator looks like.
What a dictator looks like.
So let's get to some specifics. Will he be buried by the Syrian disaster, by the refugees, by the numbers of people we do and do not take in? Will that end his reign?
I don't think so. I think that was a hot issue, obviously, for a week to 10 days, and I think his response hurt him in some circles. I think it actually got him some support in other circles, who especially as more countries in Europe started kind of put barriers around their own countries because of the hardships that all these refugees were imposing on their own countries. So a lot of people thought, well, maybe actually his response to this, although while it seemed to some as cold-hearted, it's actually a very pragmatic approach. I think that the biggest threat to Harper, David, in my view, is just the NUI that sets in after you've been in government for a long time.
Yes.
People look for something new. And I think that, I think his biggest challenge right now is unbelievably, is Justin Trudeau. A lot of people who many people considered an absolute lightweight, coming into this campaign, and yet he's just coming off what arguably, not arguably, I think was his strongest performance yet in the Monk debate on foreign policy, which is what is the one area people thought he was going to fall flat on his face. And I think the general consensus was that he
I thought the Sun gave the Monk debate to Harper. No?
What, the Toronto Sun?
No, this local paper.
Oh, some people did, but I mean, I read a lot. I read a lot of reviews, and I think that the general feeling was that the person who helped himself the most was Justin Trudeau.
When we saw these cheering crowds at various conventions, waving Nixon banners and screaming and yelling for Nixon, I actually thought I was losing my mind. I thought, is this a popsicle delusion? Mm-hmm. Don't they know this man is a crook and he's an awful person? And I have to be honest with you, when I see people looking adoringly at Justin like he's the second coming of you-know-who,
Yeah.
I think I'm looking at crazy people. Like, what are they doing?
I take it you're not a fan.
I'm not a huge fan. I don't hate the guy or anything.
Yeah.
I actually think that the conservative campaign that said he's just not ready or whatever, or just not yet, I thought was very clever. And then his answer was almost equally clever, with him walking up a hill saying, I'll tell you what I'm not ready for.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think a lot of people thought that was an effective campaign off the top. But I think, and I'm not, declaring my, bias on any of them, but I think Trudeau has gained the most strength throughout the campaign. I think he's gained credibility, and I think that he's just not ready mantra or motto is less effective right now than it was at the beginning of the campaign, when people were laughing. His greatest challenge will be just to put his pants on.
To comb his hair.
Yeah.
So let's talk about foreign policy for a minute. I think ISIL and fighter jets are right up there. I don't know how much they'll mean anything on voter day. I think when voter day comes down, to be honest, I think almost all of us revert to simple things like jobs, productivity, and taxes. I think that's what happens to us on voter day.
Yeah.
But while we're arguing about everything, Harper preaches, we have to fight evil, we have to protect the country, and a lot of people say he's overdoing it. And
yeah, my sense is that I think Harper wins on that. I do. I think that on that issue, I think he's looked strong and effective. I think he makes a very good point when he says to his two major opponents, Mulcair and Trudeau, well, how can you be against ending the war in Syria, but you don't want to do anything about ISIS? You don't want to actually fight them. I mean, how you can't fight them with words. It actually takes money and people and planes and all that sort of stuff.
Armaments, material.
So I think he makes a very good point, and I think that is an issue where Trudeau and Mulcair have been very weak, absolutely. Okay,
so let's go to one of the core issues that I think plays out on voter day, and that is taxes. One of the things, of course, that especially Trudeau, but also Mulcair, both are saying, the whole tax structure has to change. And they're several handballs short of pulling a Donald Trump and saying flat tax and irrational major changes like that. But change. Harper is saying, look, we've done reasonably well, and we're going to keep doing reasonably well.
Yeah. I would say, one of the big issues out there is economic inequality. I mean, it is a big issue. That's why you see.
You're talking about individuals or provinces or both?
No, I'm talking about individuals.
Yes,
that this great disparity that exists in this country and certainly in the United States between the rich and the poor and the middle class. I mean, that's why you hear so many people. Justin Trudeau has built his campaign around helping the middle class. So I'm not so sure that his message, and Mulcair's for that matter, that they're going to tax the rich, they're going to go after and get more money from them and give it to the poor and the middle class.
Yeah.
I think that's a strategy and a line of thinking that works with a lot of people.
And would they really? We're going to break in 1 second, but would they really do that?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think they have to. I mean, their whole economic budgets are built around this idea of getting more money out of the rich, and they're going to do it.
Well, at last, a good reason for me to have not become rich. I can tell my mom, that's why I didn't become rich, Mom. Gary Mason is our guest. We could take a little breather. Your opportunity to send us a note here at davidberner.com, and also a chance for those lovely people who support us to say hello here on Shaw Community Television Cable 4. Back with Gary Mason right after this. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. My new book about addictions, All the Way Home, Building Recovery That Works. We have a floor director because he reminds me to do simple things like look at the camera. We're back with our guest Gary Mason, columnist for the Globe and Mail. Let's bring some of this to a local front. And when we talk about infrastructure, of course, you know, everything needs repairing across the country, as it does in every country all the time, but especially in Canada. Remember, speaking of automobiles, remember the disaster of when Hyundai first came to Canada, and they had one little notebook, and they were trying to get people to open, and the car, the Pony or whatever it was, no heater, wrong tires. They didn't know what Canada was.
Yeah.
You know, well, this is a tough country.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got to repair stuff, but now people are stepping over themselves to offer $700 million and more to what's her name, Linda Hepner, to the mayor of Surrey for the Surrey Light Rail.
Right.
And they're putting UBC underground or subway or whatever it's being called on the back burner. Are they serious? Is anybody really going to, you know, if elected, are they going to actually give money and get these things to happen?
I think, you know, I think something's going to happen. I mean, I think if infrastructure is a huge deal in this campaign. Yeah. And I mean, there's no question that there's an infrastructure deficit in this country. And even, you know, the most conservative-minded policy thinkers and economists, people like David Dodge, who's advising Notley's government in Alberta right now, they're all suggesting now's the time to maybe borrow a little money when rates are this cheap and governments can get access to money at these kind of rates. Now's the time to start building the infrastructure that's absolutely falling apart and needs to be built in this country. So if you're asking me whether I think light rail is going to go ahead in Surrey, yes, I do. If you're asking me whether I think that is should be a priority over the subway line, no, I don't. I think the subway line, every study that I've seen indicates that is a bigger need for the region than light rail. But that's all. Really? It's all about politics.
And of course, then there's people like me and a few other nuts who would like to see light rail to UBC.
Yeah,
or anywhere else.
Yeah, and there's certainly a case to be made for that. Although that's a little bit more disruptive, obviously, to businesses and everything else. So,
but we've all spent time in Toronto, and Toronto's had streetcars rolling down the middle of the street forever. How disruptive is it?
Yeah, but those streetcar lines were built at a time, you know, that was much different than today. I'm not sure that if those streetcars weren't there right now and they had to build them, I'm not sure that they would go over top, as opposed to. I mean, it's more expensive, but it's less disruptive.
Why do I get the feeling, Gary Mason, that when I listen to some of these politicians, I'm hearing napkin budgets. In other words, I'm hearing numbers. I don't believe that some of these people know what they're talking about. We'll pull, you know, $1 billion here, and we'll put $700 million there, and we'll do this, and where'd you make that up? Well, you know, what popcorn box did you get that out of?
Yeah, and sometimes that ends up being true. I mean, you know, some of these predictions end up being completely off.
Yes.
At the same time, however, you know, you had the Prime Minister of this country telling everybody that he was going to balance the budget, and people thought he was crazy, and he was denounced, and every pundit in the country said it's never going to happen.
Yes.
And it happened. So, I mean, it goes both ways, you know. But you're right. I mean, when you're throwing around figures as large as the figures that we're seeing in this campaign, you really wonder, you know, if it, you know, how it is all going to add up in the end, and sometimes it just doesn't add up. I mean, there's so many variables that make up an economy.
Let's talk about personality for a minute. I'm not seeing the inner warrior emerging from any of these leaders. I'm not seeing someone who looks like, get out of my way, you know, and sometimes I yearn to see that in political leaders.
Yeah.
You know?
I think they all have different issues when it concerns that. Tom Mulcair's issue coming into the campaign, his nickname was Angry Tom. So he didn't, you know, he couldn't be seen as being too demonstrative and too angry, and you know, so he had to be kind of more calm. That was the advice he was getting from everybody. You have to come in and be, you know, sort of statesman-like. You don't show a lot of emotion, because once he starts showing emotion, he can go over the top. Yes. Justin Trudeau, I think he's just too young, you know, he doesn't have the sort of the gravitas to. He's trying hard, and he jumps around a lot on stage.
Yes.
But you know, he brings a lot of energy, but it's not the kind of energy I don't think that you're talking about. And then you have Stephen Harper, who's just, you know, he's been around the block several times. I think in the last couple of weeks, Stephen Harper has shown more energy on the campaign trail than he did certainly at the beginning. I mean, he got off to a rough start. Let's not forget.
That was my next thought. That as we get, you know, closer and closer and closer, is Harper going to put on more boxing gloves? Is he going to pump up some iron?
I think he is, actually, because I think the polls are starting to turn a little bit in their favor. I think the Conservatives can smell victory. I think he can smell it. I think that they feel like they've turned a corner in this campaign, and I'm not sure that anybody's calling a Tory majority, but I could certainly see a scenario, and a lot of people can see a scenario where they get returned with a minority.
Do you think that small but emotionally evocative issues like the knee grab, the face veil during immigration services, during citizenship services rather, do you think those kinds of powerful, hot button but relatively small issues, do you think they're going to sustain?
I think on that particular issue that you're referring to, I think it's a big deal in Quebec.
Why Quebec?
Well, that's where the debate around the NCIB has really been centered, and most Quebecers fall in with Stephen Harper when it comes to his position. I mean, I think that, believe it or not, that's one of the reasons that has helped.
Was the woman who took it to court in Quebec?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that this has helped Stephen Harper immensely. I don't think it's a big issue nationally. I think it really is an issue that's centered mostly in Quebec. It dominated the French language debates. I mean, you know, believe it or not. I mean, I don't know if it was half of the debate was centered on it, but a lot of it was.
It's one of those oddball, seemingly tiny issues that can bring out both the best and the worst in all of us.
Yeah.
It can bring out a wonderful sense of inclusivity, and it can also bring out the sort of inner fascist of people, you know, and the worst kind of patriot.
Yeah, I think certainly Stephen Harper's old stock Canadians, his famous phrase, the Globe debate.
That was
I think any
unfortunate.
Old stock Canadians would certainly side with him on you know, in terms of his policy view on the NCIB. So but I don't think it's a major election issue, though.
What will the world look like on October 20th?
The world?
This world, Canada.
Oh, Canada.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to look radically different.
I don't think so either.
I don't think no matter who gets in, I mean, it's going to look radically different. You know, I mean, there's only so much. You know, Canadians don't elect radicals, and you know, a lot of people try and paint Stephen Harper as a radical. I don't think he's a radical.
A radical?
Yeah, absolutely. A redneck radical. I mean, that's how a lot of the elite, the Laurentian elites, the mediocrity, meritocracy, like to see him. But I don't. We just don't elect radicals.
I think bankers and people who deal with large numbers, I think they have the attitude of nothing will change. Basically, it'll be largely the same. I think the only time I can remember in my own lifetime, other than in other countries, of course, but here in Canada, when everybody seemed shocked was when Dave Barrett was elected.
Yeah.
And it was like there were people mourning. There were people freaking out. You know, we almost had people jumping out of buildings.
Well, I can tell you, in terms of the rest of the country, I covered an election just recently, I think, where Canada was shocked when Rachel Notley got elected in Alberta. I mean, a lot of people did not see that coming. And but that goes to show you that the country is changing. The demographics are changing. Alberta is certainly changing. I mean, that is a province that has changed radically in the last 5 or 10 years, and a lot of people just didn't see it.
Why are we not hearing more about the two pipeline issues? Because for a while those were top stories, the Kinder Morgan and the Kitimat thing. Why aren't we
Northern Gateway?
Yeah, Northern Gateway.
Well, I mean, Kinder Morgan is going through the environmental review process, so I mean that's sort of playing itself out, and it's got a ways to go. Northern Gateway, it's just kind of died. I mean, even though it's still kind of alive technically, I think most people believe that one is dead.
Dead as in it won't happen?
It's not going to happen. Never going to happen. That one is dead and put away. I think Alberta's best hope is that Kinder Morgan somehow miraculously makes it way. Although Rachel Notley today was saying that they may have to find a different endpoint for it, not the Port of Vancouver. She's suggesting maybe Delta Port or something like that. So I don't know.
Where are you going to be on the night of the election?
I'll probably be here in the Bureau or at a campaign headquarters or someplace like that. I mean, it's going to be an interesting election. I mean, the result, I think it's interest, like they are in all elections, to really starting to heat up.
For people who aren't deeply involved in political process, they may be shocked to know that there are thousands of people beavering away like crazy as we speak on this election. I just spoke to an old friend. He's working 2 different campaigns. Very far geographically apart. In the Lower Mainland.
Absolutely. I mean, it's happening all over the place.
Gary, thanks. Always great to see you. You're looking great, kid. I hope you find something to drive. Gary Mason, Globe and Mail columnist. So next week, Dr. Amit Mather, the CEO of a company called Live Care. Can you have a doctor in your house, in your ambulance, almost anywhere? You can if he's a virtual doctor. All of that next week. Thanks for being here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.